Hello and welcome back to Swiping Through History. I'm here once again with the wonderful Mike Ingram, and today we're going to be talking in a little bit more detail about episode 2 of our War of the Roses series, the Battle of Blore Heath that happened in 1459. Thank you to everyone who has already watched that episode so far, and if you haven't and you're watching this for the first time, please do make sure you go back, check it out, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. All the support really does go a long way. So to start with, Blore Heath, in the episode, we talk a lot about Margaret of Anjou. She is the character that really steers us through this episode. Can you tell us a little bit about her background? Who actually was she?
Margaret was the daughter of the Duke of Anjou. She's a very interesting character. The Duke of Anjou himself he's related to the French throne, so he's one of the princes of the blood, which there's only really sort of 4 or 5 of them, but he seems to be the leading one. However, he's got pretensions of grandeur is probably the best way to describe him, and he thinks he's the king of everywhere, but militarily he's not particularly successful, and he ends up getting taken prisoner over in Europe. And as a consequence of that, Margaret and her grandmother end up ruling Anjou. So she learns from a very early age of how to rule a country. I mean, I know Anjou's a dukedom, but nevertheless, it's fairly independent.
So she's used to having the power effectively. She's
exactly.
Used to...
Yes, yeah, and she makes a great store of that as part of what she does. And when she comes over to England, I think she wants to be able to do the same. But of course, things are very different in England, and things are done very differently in England. She's not liked from the start, predominantly as well, is because that we don't give her, or she doesn't give a dowry. And one of the conditions of the marriage is a peace settlement. And of course, the English don't want peace, and they want the dowry. It involves several of the earlier dukes who end up getting executed long before the story, as they always do. But so you're getting this anti-war party with a war party, and with Margaret being the queen at this particular time, I suppose you could describe it being the anti-war party is winning out, and Henry wants peace. He's spending the money elsewhere. He has one of the largest entourages out of probably most of the medieval kings that are following him around, which we saw at First St Albans, because those 2,000 men that he had with him were really courtiers as opposed to soldiers, whereas with the Yorkists, they're just pure soldiers.
Well, it didn't go well for the Lancastrians then in 1455, did it? So
no.
so we've got, so this gives us a great picture of who Margaret is. She's used to having the power. She's strong-willed. She's a very fiery character. And initially, when she comes to the UK, well, to England, she is not liked one bit. And I think what's interesting is you then bring up Henry, King Henry, her husband. So we also talk about him briefly in the episode, and the fact that actually, you know, she wears the pants in that relationship. She holds all the power because he was quite weak as a king. He spent some time after the Battle of St Albans in 1455. He spent a lot of time with mental health issues.
Yes, yeah. Actually, it does suggest that up until the point where he has his mental collapse, that he is actually quite a strong person. And of course, his mental collapse may be connected to his French ancestor. That possibly comes from there. His mother being a daughter of a king of France as well, which adds to it. And he thought he was made of glass at one point, the French king. So he had serious mental health issues, and it may have been something that was transmitted through the genes, but it needed a spark to set it off. And the loss of France, which he appears to get after then seems to come on, and for quite a while he is virtually catatonic. But then he seems to recover a bit, but it's never clear how far he recovers.
Yeah.
Quite clearly, then in the background, you've got Margaret, which is taking control, and she's got her own set of courtiers around her.
So by the time he recovers, she has effectively taken control in a way and is ruling the country
Yes.
in his stead. And
Yes.
and that's what the Yorkists really are not happy about. That's really what they're resisting at the early stages of the Wars of the Roses. Is it's not actually an anti the king kind of crusade. It's more anti his kind of courtiers and
The
his
people
kind of
around him.
advisors. Yeah, the people around
Yes.
him. And I imagine
Yes.
it didn't help that she was French as well.
No. Again, for all those reasons, and we have to remember as well that the Battle of Castellon wasn't that long before then, which was the last official battle of the 100 Years' War. Something we haven't discussed or that's part of it is the economic situation in the country, because the economics, the country itself was rapidly going into a poor state. There'd been unseasonably high rain. There was droughts. There was really poor harvests. You'd got Henry spending money like water. You got him creating new nobles at a rate of knots. And all these things are sort of coming together, I suppose, for the perfect storm. People are still changing sides at this time. If they're getting the rough end of the pineapple from a Lancastrian, then they'll go and join the Yorkists. And in actual fact, Lord Audley's son actually joins the Yorkists soon afterwards, because they're suffering under the Lancastrian regime.
And it happens in the battle itself as well. On that final infantry charge up the hill, and a number of the Lancastrians actually switch sides, don't they?
Yes, they do. And this is a big feature of pretty much the early parts of the Wars of the Roses, that people will change sides backwards and forwards to suit their own ends. And it's back to the football analogy. You just move from one to the other as you need to.
Whatever suits you, effectively.
Yeah.
So in terms of Margaret's army, she's in the same vicinity of the battle. She actually watches the battle from a church steeple further off. Does she have men with her? Does she have an army with her, or is she out on her own? What really is going on at that point?
She's got an army with her, and they're still all gathering and heading towards what you think, or what they think will be the big showdown outside Ludford. But of course, things change as they move along. So it's those individual chess pieces that we talk about are moving to their place, I suppose, in the attempt to become king, and the movement that goes with it. But the key things here is that it appears that they're moving for this final showdown, or what they think is going to be a final showdown.
And Audley is effectively tasked with intercepting Salisbury to stop him reaching Ludlow on that march south from Midland, and which he does. It's something that I also find very interesting myself. It's one of the questions that I always I'm kind of trying to work out and figure out for myself is why, if Audley is intercepting Salisbury, why Salisbury is the one that manages to take such a strong defensive position on top of the hill, with the wood behind him and the stream at the bottom. Because militarily, it makes no sense that the person laying the ambush doesn't have the advantage in terms of the geography, as it were.
No. And I think as well, it's also military experience that makes a difference. I know Audley's involved in some of the fighting in France, but he's not a seasoned commander, shall we say, in the same way that Salisbury probably is. So he's got about a bit. Salisbury's probably got more military sense, and tends to understand and read landscapes and all the things that go with it.
Which also makes sense with that ruse that he uses, which is as old as the Battle of Hastings itself. You know, in 1066, that idea of making it look like your men are fleeing the field when they're actually not, and they're just luring the enemy to attack them. So just to think about a little bit the precursor to the Battle of Blore Heath. You know, between 1455 and 1459, between the first episode and the second episode, as it were, the Battle of St Albans and Blore Heath, we get, it's not like it's 4 years of peace. You know, the Lancastrians and the Yorkists are still very much at each other's throats. So what is that kind of framework like? Well, what really, you know, how does that really unfold?
They seem to have reasonably kept their distance from each other. They're involved in the court and decision-making processes, but they keep their distance. They have what's called the Love Day, when they're all supposed to walk through the centre of London holding hands to show that they're no longer enemies.
Sounds like a primary school argument, you know, make up, hold hands.
Oh, it does. And that's basically what they try to do, but you've still got that animosity underneath, bubbling up underneath. But then, of course, you've got a new reason to carry on the fighting, is because Margaret has a child. And so you've got someone in the line of succession.
And that child is there. Well, there are rumors. Obviously, we can only really speculate. But there are rumors say that the child, Margaret's child, is not actually the king's. It potentially belongs to Somerset, who was killed at the first Battle of St Albans, if I'm not mistaken. Which then, again, it starts to bring in this theme of revenge and vengeance. That kind of really will start to creep in as these episodes go on, and we tell more and more stories of the battles that go forward. Is revenge really becomes a key driving factor in the Wars of the Roses. And I guess this is the kernel of that. It's the beginnings of it. It's the starting of that, thread, as it were.
And Margaret wants to see her son on the throne. And she moves hell and high water to actually try and make sure that happens. And again, as you say, as we go on, you will see that, going back to the Game of Thrones analogy, I suppose this son is being brought up very much like Joffrey in it, and he is that sort of Joffrey character. He's brought up to hate Yorkists and have them executed. But we'll be talking more about that in due course.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I mean, I think that's kind of covered a little bit more in detail some of the surrounding elements of the Battle of Blore Heath. Obviously, everything else is really tackled in the episode, the video. It explores the actual the events on the day and what happens. Yeah, it was great to chat to you, Mike. Thank you very much for doing this once again.
Thank you.
Your ideas and your research really does help drive this forward, and it's really interesting to hear you talk and give us that little bit more detail as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.